Hello and welcome to my channel. Bonsoir et bienvenue sur ma chaîne. My name is Muriel and I thought I would do an October reading wrap-up video, though I do realize that it's already the second week of November. It won't be a long list because I've said already that I read about a book a week. I know that's probably not that much compared to a lot of other booktubers, but reading is not my only hobby. I'm also an amateur pianist. I draw a lot and, the little things of life take time. So the best way for me to handle my cravings for reading is just, a book a week, sometimes two. In the past, I've had periods where I would read 3 books a week. That was a bit too difficult for me, so it's 1 or 2. Usually what I'll do is I combine a novel or a non-fiction book, or a novel and a graphic novel or graphic non-fiction book. So, like I said, 4 books, 4 novels in this case. All Ursula K. LeGuin. I decided last summer that the end of 2019 would be mostly dedicated to rereading and discovering new works by Ursula K. LeGuin. So I'll do this in chronological order. First, I already said this in another video, so this was both a reread and a new read because I previously had a copy of the Wind's 12 Quarters. It was on its own, right? It's a self-contained short story collection, basically sci-fi, but sorry, there is also fantasy short stories in there. In fact, short stories that technically belong to the Earthsea universe that she wrote before she wrote the Earthsea novels. But then I discovered that there was another short story collection called The Compass Rose, which I'd never read, and that Science Fiction Masterworks had come out with an edition that combined the 2 of them. So I'll be doing a full review of this, but briefly, I was actually really surprised how much I enjoyed this. So let me explain. I had enjoyed this when I'd read it the first time, so The Wind's 12 Quarters, but I remembered that there were just a few stories I didn't like that much, and so it soured a bit the entire collection, but I mostly loved it because I love Ursula K. LeGuin. This time I didn't get that feeling. I just enjoyed really the vast majority of short stories. Most of them were solid, and The Compass Rose also had solid stories. Now that was a really enjoyable read. Also, just short stories. It's different from what I usually do, which is reading novels. I don't read that many short stories, but this was cool. Good pacing and everything. But I'll do a review of this later on. Then I read this. Always Coming Home. I've also mentioned this in another video. This was a bit different. By this I mean this isn't actually a novel as such, or I guess you could call it an experimental novel. It's definitely fiction. It's a piece of world building, quite beautiful world building. I really enjoyed this. It was quite beautiful, but it was very different. So I'll also be doing a full review of this, but briefly, you do have a central narrative, a story that threads it all together. Then you have notes on local customs. Right, I should say, so this is basically about a tribal, somewhat utopian, heavily inspired by Native Americans society, but in the future, living on the US Pacific coast. And so it's in the future, it's like post-apocalyptic in a way, it's post-technology. There is technology, but it's like confined to a very specific thing. And so you have the Kesh, which are a people. Again, there's lots of inspiration from some Native American tribe. I do realize that covers a lot of ground. And so it describes the way they live, their medicinal practices, their technology, their ritual, spiritual customs, the way they marry, the way they conceptualize, birth, childhood, adolescence, etc., how they deal with death. And then you have poems, a lot of poetry in this. You have plays or elements of plays. You even have a bit of sheet music at the back. And notes from, someone who's supposed to be an anthropologist that came from the past. So it's, an anthropologist that had a time machine. That's not really explained in the book. So yeah, it was really different. I could understand that some people might not be into this because it is a bit, what's the word? I don't have a good word. It's not a single narrative. It's not a single unified narrative. It's experimental. I really don't have a better word for it. But I enjoyed this and I will be doing a review of it. And still Ursula K. LeGuin, like I said, everything I read was by her. This past month. So I read a novella. It's not a short story, it's a novella. The Beginning Place. I didn't really like it. That was weird for me. In fact, another booktuber I follow, who's also an Ursula K fan, said she didn't really like this either. Like, I've never really had this experience of not actively disliking, but really being meh about Ursula K story. So basically, you've got two characters that stumble upon a gateway to an alternative reality, I suppose, where it's perpetual twilight, which attracted me because I freaking love the video game The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess and the Twilight Realm. So I thought the concept could be interesting. So you got this realm of Twilight. I guess it's technically fantasy. It's classified as a fantasy romance. Yeah, I suppose. I don't know. It didn't really go anywhere. I could see the romance coming from a mile away, and I was like, you know, that's just not really my thing. I don't know. I felt like there could have been potential with this Twilight universe, and there's a monster hunt, but I don't really like why, what for. I was really surprised to be disappointed by an Ursula K story like that. I won't be doing a review of this, obviously, nor will I be doing a review of the next item, which is another novella, The Eye of the Heron. That was much better. I enjoyed that. It was actually a good short story. This is about basically the descendants of a penal colony on a planet called Victoria. Very sparsely inhabited. I mean, it's just basically descendants from a penal colony and descendants from political activists. Basically, they're all about non-violence. Non-violence proning anarchists, I guess you could call them, who were shipped off because they pissed off the powers that were back on Earth. So their descendants and the descendants of the criminals that were sent there live. I mean, basically the descendants of the criminals are in charge, sort of like they're the upper class, and the descendants of the peace activists are more the farmers, peasants, and their whole way of life is about non-violence and peaceful resistance and cooperation. So they're trying to find a way to not be subjugated to the bosses, they're called bosses, and try to found a new city, a new settlement on the planet. Because I mean, it's a huge planet, there's only the one city and the one farming community, so there's space for humans there. The characters were interesting, all these ideas about non-violence, but also, you know, the limitations of idealism. I think that was a very prevalent theme in this, because sometimes, you know, you have ideals, but they don't always work, and you just have to face that reality and adapt. I also like the fact that there was a lot of references to South American origins, because basically the penal colony belonged to Brazil, or a Brazilian-led South American empire conglomerate of countries. So for once, it's not, you know, it's not European, or at least Anglo-Saxon European-centric, because all the bosses have names that derive from Portuguese and Spanish, so that was little something that was a bit different, and a good different. So no, I would recommend this. I won't be doing a full review of it, I don't think it's necessary, but if you're a fan of Ursula K LeGuin and you've loved works of hers like The Dispossessed, this is a bit in the vein of that. So yeah, that was enjoyable. I'm happy I read this. And that's all for October, like I said. November will also not feature, well no, actually it will feature more books, because like I said, I'm rereading the Earthsea Cycle, and technically there's 6 books in there, though I consider it as one narrative entity, and then that will leave me time to read 2 other books, I think. So November will have technically more book objects, but actually less stories to review and talk about. I hope you all have a lovely day or evening. I will see you in the next video, and in the meantime, bye bye!